Imagine your eyes opening on cold sand. The waves are still pulling back behind you, no sound except wind and water. You're alone now. But the real truth is stranger than you think. Your body and your mind already know exactly what to do in the first 60 minutes, before you even start thinking. The first thing that happens is not searching for food. It is not building shelter. It is something much deeper. Your mind slips into what researchers call survival shock. Psychologist John Leach, who studied survivor behavior at the University of Portsmouth, found that a huge percentage of people freeze completely in the first moments of a disaster. They don't scream. They don't run. They just sit there. Why does the brain do exactly that in the moment you need to move the most? The answer lies in how your brain works every single day. Your brain runs on routine. When that routine collapses suddenly, your brain has no ready-made map, so it briefly stalls, like a computer rebooting. Leach calls this cognitive paralysis. The good news? It doesn't last long. Within minutes, your mind starts searching for the first usable database it has. Memory, stories, movies. Even if you've never trained for survival, your brain will try to copy everything it has ever seen. Now your body starts behaving very differently from what you'd expect. The first priority is not food. You can survive without food for weeks. The first priority is water. Within 3 days without water, your body starts to truly break down. That's why the first thing you should search for isn't fruit or fish, but a source of fresh water, a small stream, a rock coated in morning dew. Even a plant itself might store water in its roots. Do you know who proved that the human body can survive relying only on the sea? French doctor Alain Bombard. In 1952, he sailed alone across the Atlantic Ocean in a small rubber raft with almost no supplies to prove a strange theory. He believed that most people who die in maritime disasters don't die from hunger, but from despair. So he drank small, carefully measured amounts of seawater, ate raw fish, and squeezed liquid from their bodies. He survived 65 days. The message he left behind wasn't about food. It was about the mind. He said fear kills far faster than hunger ever could. This is exactly what makes an isolated island more of a psychological test than a physical survival test. Because once you secure a water source, you'll face a much bigger enemy than hunger. Empty time. Absolute silence. No notifications, no human voices, nothing to occupy your mind except your own thoughts. How many times a day does your mind escape itself through your phone? Now there's nowhere to escape to. After water comes shelter, not just because it protects you from cold, but because it gives your mind back a sense of control. Researcher Lawrence Gonzalez, author of the book Deep Survival, studied dozens of real survivor cases and found a fascinating pattern. The survivors who lived weren't necessarily the strongest physically. They were the ones most able to set a small task and stick to it. Building a simple shelter, even leaning branches against a rock, gives your mind the feeling that the situation is at least partly under control. And that feeling, it turns out, matters more than the shelter itself. Where should that shelter go? Not on the open beach, and not deep in the tree line either. The smartest survivors build just behind the first row of vegetation, close enough to see the water, far enough to be shielded from wind and storm surge. Height matters too. Ground level floods. A slightly raised spot, even a few feet up a gentle slope, keeps you dry when the tide changes its mind in the middle of the night. Now comes fire. Not just for warmth or cooking. Fire is a deeply rooted psychological signal. For millions of years, fire around your ancestors meant safety. Predators kept their distance. The group gathered together. Even today, when you sit in front of a campfire, your attention drops automatically. Have you ever noticed that? Your body remembers something you never personally lived through, but your ancestors did, hundreds of thousands of years ago. Fire also does something you might not expect. It becomes a clock. Without a phone, without a sunset schedule you're used to, watching flames rise and fall gives your mind a rhythm to hold on to. Feed it in the morning. Bank the coals at night. Small, repeated actions, turning chaos into a day that actually has a shape. Food comes last, even though it's the first thing most people think of. Insects, as much as they disgust you, contain more protein than a lot of meat. Small fish near the shore are easier to catch than large fish in deep water. Plants, on the other hand, are more dangerous than you think. More than 90% of poisoning cases in survival situations come from eating an unknown plant. The rule survival experts teach is simple. If you're not 100% sure, don't eat it. There's a strange comfort hidden in this rule. You don't need to know everything. You just need one reliable test repeated every time. Smell it. Rub it on your skin first. Wait. Taste a tiny piece. Wait again. It feels painfully slow. But slow is exactly what keeps you alive when curiosity would have killed you in one bite. But the most dangerous enemy in this whole story isn't hunger or thirst or even wild animals. It's time. The first days are packed with tasks. Water, shelter, fire, food. But what happens after a week, once all of this becomes routine? That's where the real test begins. Researcher Stephen Callahan, who survived 76 days alone on a small raft in the Atlantic Ocean after his boat sank, wrote in his memoir that long isolation doesn't attack the body first. It attacks your sense of time. The days blur together. The hours lose meaning. And without a clear purpose, the mind starts to break down long before the body does. That's why real survivors, according to Gonzalez's research, invent small rituals for themselves. They carve a line on a tree every day. They talk out loud to themselves. They set tiny imaginary goals like collecting 10 seashells before sunset. Why do they do that? Because the human mind doesn't just need food to stay alive, it needs meaning. A purpose, no matter how small or trivial it seems on the surface. Something else happens around week 2. Something almost nobody expects. Loneliness starts sounding like company. Sailors adrift for long stretches have described hearing voices in the wind, seeing faces in the waves, feeling a presence walking just behind them. Doctors call it isolation-induced hallucination. It isn't madness, it's your brain, starved of other minds to interact with, quietly inventing some of its own. Unsettling, yes. But also, in its own strange way, proof of how deeply social a creature you really are. And here appears the biggest contradiction in this entire story. A person who lived alone on an island for months didn't survive just because they found water and food. They survived because they recreated the routine they used to live in the city, with primitive tools. The same mind that once planned tomorrow's work meeting is now planning tomorrow's firewood collection. The need for structure, for a schedule, for a small daily meeting, never disappeared. It just changed shape. Signaling for rescue follows the same logic. 3 of anything, 3 fires, 3 whistle blasts, 3 flashes of light, is the universal signal for distress. Smoke by day, flame by night. A signal fire built, daled, and ready, but not lit until a ship or plane actually appears, is worth more than a fire burning uselessly for a week straight. Patience, once again, outperforms panic. Now think about the tools in your hands. You don't have a knife, you don't have rope, but your ancestors didn't either for most of human history, and they still crossed oceans and hunted animals twice their size. A sharp-edged rock becomes a blade. Vines become cord. A hollowed-out coconut becomes a cup and then a bowl, and then, if you're patient enough, a bailer for a raft. Anthropologist Kim Hill, who spent decades studying hunter-gatherer societies, found something surprising. Almost automatic habit of looking at ordinary objects and asking one simple question: what else could this be? That question matters more than it sounds. Every tool you've ever used, from a spoon to a smartphone, started as someone staring at raw material and imagining it at a use nobody had imagined before. Strip away the factory and that instinct doesn't disappear. It just becomes urgent again. There's another twist most people never expect. If you weren't washed ashore alone, if even one other person is with you, everything changes, and not always for the better. From Antarctic research stations to shipwreck survivors have documented a repeating pattern. Small irritations, a tone of voice, a shared task done slightly wrong grow into conflicts far bigger than the situation deserves. The scarcity outside the group quietly turns into tension inside it. The survivors who do best aren't the ones who never argue. They're the ones who assign clear roles early, so nobody has to fight over who's in charge when it actually matters. And if there truly is no one else, silence becomes its own kind of companion, whether you want it or not. Sleep becomes stranger too. Without walls, without a mattress, without the sound of a city humming outside your window, your body has to relearn what safety feels like at night. Many survivors report sleeping in short bursts rather than one long stretch, waking every few hours to check the fire, the tide line, the sky. It feels exhausting at first, but it's an old pattern, one your ancestors likely used for most of human history, back when a full uninterrupted night's sleep in the open would have been a genuine risk rather than a comfort. As days turn into weeks, your relationship with hunger itself starts to change. The sharp, painful hunger of day 1 softens by week 2 into something quieter, almost muted. This isn't your imagination. The body, sensing a prolonged shortage, shifts its fuel source, burning stored fat more efficiently and dulling the urgency of the signal. It's not a solution. It's a delay. Time to think clearly instead of desperately. Think about this for a moment. You, in your ordinary life today, do the exact same thing. You wake up, you make your coffee, you check your phone, you go to work. All small rituals, giving you a sense of control over a day you don't actually fully control. You're not as far from that survivor on the island as you think. You're just doing the same thing with more comfortable tools and less obvious danger. In the end, an isolated island isn't a test of how many days you can survive without food. It's a mirror showing you something that was already inside you the whole time. That the greatest thing a human needs to survive isn't strength or tools, but the ability to create a meaning out of nothing. Picture that first moment again, your eyes opening on cold sand. That moment wasn't the true beginning of survival. Real survival began the moment your mind decided to invent a reason to wake up the next day.